Hey everyone, Chris Lopez here, and this is our 14th module in the Ultimate Denver House Hacking course. And this is actually the last one that we have planned from the entire series that we have planned out. I'm really looking forward to this one, not because all the stuff we've talked about is not vital to it, but as we've talked about before, we all got into real estate to buy multiple properties and to be able to retire one day. Hopefully retire before you're 60, 65 years old, that type of thing. And understanding some of these long game aspects, this is how you actually go out there and can really create some wealth. And we'll go through a couple strategies and techniques that can actually have a huge multiplier effect as to how you can actually gain more rental properties. Now, I know I'm not the only person out there. And I often tell this to my clients because I bought my very first place about a decade or so ago. I was like, wow, I got this thing for so cheap and so good. I'm never selling this thing. Well, then I sold this thing. I sold that property, got something much better because I understand some of these fundamental keys for building long-term wealth and using real estate with that. So we'll go through these examples. But before we do, let me introduce my crew. Again, my name is Chris Lopez. And I've got Joe Massey and Jeff White with me. So Joe is our go-to lender. Joe, how are you?
Fantastic. I'm excited to be part of your crew. I never get to be part of somebody's crew. I've been part of a gang, been part of like a club, but now to be part of a crew. I'm pretty excited about this. So my name is Joe Massey, Castle & Cook Mortgage. Here to answering questions and be a resource on residential financing, any sort of long-term financing you need for your house hacks, your primary residence, investment properties, anything like that. And a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is, making the next move, buying the next property, the second, third, fourth, fifth property, which I'm really excited to be joined by Mr. Jeff White because he is an expert in this on buying the next property, the second, the third, the fourth one. Jeff, how are you doing today?
Excellent. Thanks for the intro, Joe. I'm excited to be here as well. This is definitely a strategy I think about. This is probably the main strategy I think about going through all the house hacking I do here in Denver. And I'm also a house hacking coach just to help people with all types of house hacking situations and strategies and questions and just helping optimize their house hacking portfolio.
All right, well, let's jump into this because this is going to be meaty. We're going to go through a few examples, talk a few spreadsheets, talk a few numbers, but we'll do our best to talk about them at a high level so you can understand them while you listen or watch. But if you want the details, visit the website. We'll include screenshots of the spreadsheets, or if you need more details, email one of us, and we'll be happy to get all the details with you. So let's talk about a few key points to keep in mind in terms of real estate that are keys to building long-term wealth. Now, one that's often not mentioned and definitely does not show up on a spreadsheet is just the experience and the knowledge that you gain. So, for example, a few minutes before we started this recording, Joe, Jeff, and I were talking. We were getting ready for this. And we were talking about the module that we recorded previously, which was the one Jeff led on just how to manage your property, getting tenants, all that stuff. And, Jeff was, we said to Jeff, like, hey, dude, after hearing all your stuff, that just makes us even happier as far as using property managers, just because, there's a lot of stuff going in there. And Jeff was like, yeah, I get that. But, my plan is I'm going to do this for a couple more years because I got the time, I got the interest. But once I get to a point, I'm going to move on to, hiring a property management. But while Jeff is out there doing that himself, while he's in the trenches doing all that, he's gaining a tremendous amount of experience and knowledge. And that is really hard to quantify, but it's such a key item to keep in mind when it comes to building, just long-term wealth, because that's one of those things behind the scenes that helps people execute on deals and get things done. So keep in mind as you're doing all this, and the times when they're rough, because you'll have those times when they're rough where you got a tenant that does something to you or to your property, I should say. That's part of the experience. That's part of the knowledge, and it helps you become a better investor. And that's one step towards you building that long-term wealth.
And you can't learn all of it from a book, right? You can read books, you can learn all sorts of stuff, but there is no substitute to actually doing it. I'm sure, Jeff, you would agree with that.
Yeah, the books, it's great to have knowledge and build from there, but going all in and buying your first property and managing tenants, dealing with contractors, that's your education right there.
And so getting on to some specific metrics here is cash flow, because this is what often everyone thinks, hey, buy real estate, you get cash flow. Now, by this point, you should know if you go out there and buy a house hack, you go buy a single family home house hack for 5% down, a $4,000 property while you're living there, or once you move out, you're not getting rich off that initial cash flow. Your margins are tight. It's not uncommon to have a slightly negative cash flow property to neutral to a few $100s to maybe $1,000 if you're really rocking things well. But either way, if you're making $1,000 a month off that property, no one's retiring off that one property, or at least no one that I know is retiring off that one property. And you're not getting rich off of that. But something that Joe and I always talk about with our clients is, what's your biggest expense? And Joe, what is my biggest expense when I buy a rental property and I use you?
Your mortgage. Number one thing every time, mortgage.
Yeah. And key thing about this, because you go through Joe, you're getting a 30-year fixed mortgage payment. And I always buy stuff on 30-year fixed. That's what I always recommend my clients. And Joe, whether you're doing a house hack loan or investment property loan, what's a rough percentage of investors that do 30-year mortgages and those that don't?
99% of my clients do 30-year fixed rate mortgages. Less than 1% do adjustable rate mortgages.
Yeah. So if you think about this, you can't see me right now, but I got my arm. It's flat, and that's showing that's actually the mortgage payment. Your mortgage payment stays the same in month 1 to month, 320, 350. Right there, right towards it, 360. I couldn't do the math in my head. 360. But what generally happens over time? Your expenses go up some, but your biggest expense is not, is your mortgage. That doesn't go up. The other stuff, utilities, taxes, they go up some. What else goes up? Rents go up. And so as your rents go up, that's where you start seeing bigger and bigger cash flow. And if you look at historical numbers in Denver, we generally have about a 4% rent appreciation. Now, it'll be like that in the future. Who knows? But that's our best guess because that's what we've seen in the past. So you got in year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, and you should see more cash flow after your after your expenses and after your mortgage payments because your biggest expense is fixed. So we'll go through an example listed on one of the spreadsheets, but conceptually, I want you to understand that because, again, this is one of those things that builds long-term wealth. Another thing that hardly anyone ever talks about is the amazing tax benefits you get from real estate, also known as depreciation. Not appreciation with an A, but depreciation with a D as in dog. And so what this is a rule from the IRS and the federal government that says, hey, if you own an investment property, you can depreciate a part of the property and actually have it go and have that loss go on your taxes. And so what it is really a paper loss or a phantom loss. It's not real money that you're actually having to write a check for and you're losing. But in your tax return, you actually get to take a deduction off of there. And that often puts cash back in your pocket at the end of the year, come April, May, June, whenever you file your taxes, because that actually lowers your tax liability on your property and actually can go across other income streams. So we've talked more about this in another module and definitely talk to your CPA about this because this is a benefit that is hardly ever talked about. Joe, can you add anything on the depreciation? Because I want to get people the sense of how important it is, but I don't want to teach like an hour-long class on there. So I just want to emphasize how amazing this is.
Yeah. So not sure everybody's political views on the call, but you watch TV, you read things whenever they talk about this tax change or that tax change, and they're always talking about the upper 1%. The upper 1% get all these benefits of owning real estate. The upper 1% get all of this benefit from these various tax things. Depreciation is something that the top 1% get a ton of benefit on, but guess what? Even the bottom 1%, if you own real estate, get a lot of benefit on that. So this is a way to level the playing field a little bit with owning real estate and have you take advantage of some of the things that the Warren Buffetts of the world get and the other billionaires of the world get on their tax benefits. Depreciation is one that even little guys can take advantage of. So you definitely want to understand it. You want to make sure, maybe if you don't understand it, you want to make sure your CPA understands it. That's the most critical person who needs to know how to do it.
Joe, I'm glad I asked you because that was great explanation. So the other thing to keep in mind is the equity that builds in your property. And there's two ways you get equity in your property is through appreciation Now, Joe, can we guarantee appreciation?
No, sir.
But what do you estimate when you buy a rental property? What do you estimate for appreciation?
So I always assume 5% growth year over year. The reason I assume that is because I only buy properties in Denver inside the C470 loop. In the last 45 years in Denver, prices have gone up an average of 6% every single year. Now, there's been some times when prices went down, sometimes when prices went up 2%, sometimes when prices went up 15%. Over the long term, Denver prices appreciate at 6%. So because of that, I take a more conservative approach and assume 5% appreciation.
And Jeff, when you buy properties into your long-term modeling, do you expect properties to appreciate?
I do. And actually, I'm a little more conservative than Joe. I only do 3%.
And that's pretty common here.
It.
You'll hear people, it's usually between 3 to 5%. You hear people doing it. If it's higher than 5%, I think it's a little too optimistic. Lower than 3%, I think it's being too conservative. But if you're anywhere doing 3 to 5%, I fall in there too. Depending on my mood, I'll do 3 or 4%, but I usually do 3%. So keep in mind, as you build appreciation, or as the properties appreciate and you build equity, that starts building what I call your real estate piggy bank. It's not cash you can take out today that gets deposited in your checking account like your monthly rent does. But later on down the road, when you go to sell the property or you go talk to Joe, do a cash out refinance, you can actually take that money and go out there and buy more properties. So it's money you're building in the for future use. The other way you build up equity is through principal pay down from your tenants. So, and I say from your tenants, it's actually whenever you write your mortgage payment, your mortgage payment goes to two things. Part of it goes towards interest and part of it goes towards principal reduction. And since your tenants are paying your mortgage for you, you get other people's money paying down your principal. So every single month, if you're writing $1,000 check, a couple dollars of that, or a few dollars of that, or whatever the amount goes towards principal. And again, as you pay that down, you're building more equity in your property. So we have a really, really detailed podcast on here. And Joe and I also teach this class a few times throughout the year. If you want more details, check out the Investment Property Analysis course series, Module 1, Cash Flows on Everything, or come over our classes or webinars where we talk about this, because we spend a good hour and a half just talking about cash flow, depreciation, appreciation, principal pay down. And it's amazing. And it's one of my favorite classes. And we always have a packed house. So I want to pull up a spreadsheet here and actually go through some of these examples. So what we're looking at here, this is the spreadsheet or the property in the spreadsheet we did back in one of the early modules where we talked about a deal analysis. So this is just the case that we've been using for a while. It's that $375,000 detached house in Aurora that is being rented room by room. So as a quick refresher, the person bought for 5% down. Purchase price was $375,000, have a 3.875% interest rate. The numbers we'll be showing you on here, we're assuming a $3,200 rent, and that's assuming 4 bedrooms at $800 a month, and that the person has moved out of the property since then. So we're going to go to one of these tabs on Joe's spreadsheet called the long-term analysis, and this is a tab that we have not talked about yet on this call. So what this does, it's actually just a long tab or a long part of the spreadsheet that shows year 1 to year 30 every year of what your payments are, your cash flow, your expenses, and all the items in here. So Joe, can you give us a quick rundown on what we have on this page?
Yeah. So do me a favor and just click on the cash flow tab real quick on the bottom. So this, if you'll scroll to the top, please, this is your 1 year cash flow analysis. All right. And this has all of your details on it. Now, if you would, Chris, go to the long-term analysis. And year number 1 is the same result from that cash flow tab. It's just shortened and zoomed out a little bit so that year number 1 is everything we were looking at on the previous slide. Okay. And then you go over to year number 2. So you assume that rents go up by the amount you've increased rents. We assume that repairs and maintenance go up based on those increased rents, taxes, insurance, utilities, everything goes up by a factor of 3% for inflation. And then continuing down, you've got your net operating income, and then subtracting out your mortgage payment and your mortgage insurance, which very important, those two items don't change. They remain the same, with the exception that mortgage insurance eventually goes away, which you can see over to the right hand of the side of the screen, that in year 10, you're paying $0 in mortgage insurance. So your mortgage payment and your mortgage insurance, those are inflation protected. They're fixed, right? They're not going to increase. Then you've got below that your property value. Your value is increasing based on the amount we put in there. Maybe I put in 5%, maybe Jeff puts in 3%. You can adjust that on the yellow highlights on the inputs tab. And then your mortgage balance is paying down because every month a portion goes towards principal and a portion goes towards interest. And then it shows your total equity. So you can see as you go along on each year for your cash flow is growing, your mortgage payment's staying the same, and your equity is going up. And then the very bottom, you've got in blue is the appreciation. You've got the dollar amount that the property appreciates, and then the percentage based on how much you invested. That's your return on investment. Your cash flow in green, the dollar amount, and your cash on cash return. You've got in red the debt pay down. And that's a really important one. That's a big return you're getting by paying down that mortgage. And then the percentage there is a percentage of what you invested. And then your cash flow from depreciation in yellow, those are the tax benefits you're getting. And then the percentage of those benefits that you're getting based on how much you invested. You total that up at the very bottom. That is your total return on investment in dollars, and then percent based on how much you invested into the property.
Great explanation. And if you guys listening out there cannot see the spreadsheet, don't worry about it. We'll walk through a few examples here. As always, we're happy to share the spreadsheet with you as well. Because I think it's like, I don't come to this tab very often because I'm usually analyzing a property from a 1-year standpoint. But it's a very powerful thing to come look at here to understand, hey, what's the difference between year 1 and year 5 and year 10 and year 20? If you spend some time actually really study that, maybe go back and play around some variables as far as, rent and price appreciation, you'll start seeing the impact on here and helps you start understanding that long-term impact. So we're looking at year 1 here. And when we say these numbers, this is at the end of 1 year. So we bought the house for $375,000. And now it's worth $386,000. So about $11,000 gain because we're assuming a 3% price appreciation. Well, now the mortgage balance is down to about $349,000. Well, that's a $36,000 equity you have in there. And your equity is your property value minus your mortgage balance. That's your equity. And the cash flow is $4,971. So let's fast forward to let's do year 2 first. So year 2, we're assuming, rents go up some and that you're still paying down your payment. So as you'll see on here, all the expenses, operating expenses, they've gone up by 3% because that's the inflation that Joe has plugged in there. I happen to agree with that assumption. So the expenses go up. They went up from $9,800 a year to about $10,100. His mortgage payment stayed exactly the same. So the PMI payment. But now the cash flow is about $7,300 a year because we saw a jump up in rental income. Now the property value went up another $11,000 and change. So between the property value increasing and our mortgage balance decreasing by about $6,000, our equity is about $54,000. That's an $18,000 equity gain. That's a lot of money in your real estate piggy bank after a couple of years of owning the property. Now, let's fast forward to year 5 over here. So year 5, the first thing that jumps out to me is that the mortgage payment stays exactly the same. We're still at $20,103. So does the PMI payment. We're still about $1,500 on there. Expenses have gone up. Rents have gone up. But now the total annual cash flow is $9,843. The original cash flow in year 1 was about $4,900. So we've almost doubled the cash flow since then. And we've done anything in the property? Nope. We're just paying bills. We're making sure it runs well. But we're paying our mortgage payments every month. And we're being good landlords. And we're increasing our rental rates every year as leases turn over. Now, if you look at the property value, well, now the property is appreciated from $375,000 to $434,000. So great. We've seen price appreciation there. And now we also have our mortgage balance has decreased from about $350,000 to about $321,000. So now we're seeing an equity of $113,000. So right now in year 5, using pretty conservative assumptions, we're looking at a 6-figure equity gain and almost $10,000 a year in cash flow. Not too bad for what we put down, $27,000 on this property. I like those numbers. So let's fast forward to one more year over here, and we'll do year 10. So this is 5 years out. So now we're looking at about a $14,600 a year cash flow. And you'll notice a couple things. Expenses have gone up. Rents have gone up. Our mortgage payment is still $20,103 a year. But now that PMI has dropped off. So now you see nothing there. And so, Joe, if we're in year 10, we buy this, like, what does a person need to do to make sure that PMI drops off?
Nothing. Just make your payments. It'll automatically go away once you reach that 78% loan to value. If you get there sooner by making extra payments, once you get to 80%, you can actually call your servicer and request it to be removed. But once you reach 78%, it'll automatically go away. And it actually occurs, I think you have a max, so you can't do the little expansion, but scroll up just a little bit, Chris. There's a button where you can click on See All Years. And I know it doesn't work on Macs, but you can actually click that button and you can see year number 6, 7, 8. I believe this scenario, this was 5% down. So it would be in between years 8 and 9 is when that mortgage insurance would go away. And that does vary depending on how much money you put down, the interest rate, et cetera, because as soon as you hit that 78%, it does automatically go away.
And so now looking at year 10, we're making almost $15,000 a year in cash flow. Our equity is $224,000. I mean, that's $250,000 in equity, while your cash flow is $1,000 a month. So again, that is damn amazing from a 5% down property at $27,000, $28,000 down. And I mean, you can always go out to year 30. I tend not to go all the way out there to like year 31, just because that's so far in the future. Who knows what happens? But this is where things get crazy if you really go out there. You're going to be cash flowing $64,000 a year. Now, that's assuming your mortgage is paid off, and it's also assuming future inflated dollars. We're also assuming the property values increase dramatically, 3% a year, nothing too drastic, but now you have an equity of $937,000. So would, in 30 years, would $64,000 a year help you out with retirement? I think it would. I'm going to help me out. So let's go back, though, and just really take a second to digest this, because you have the power of this by holding on the property and letting things just play out. And what becomes interesting, I'm just going back to year 5 and year 10 columns, because year 5 is we're seeing $113,000 in equity. Year 10 is about $225,000 in equity. So we'll go through a few examples, because this money in your real estate piggy bank, your equity, gives you a lot more options to go out there and actually start really leveraging this money to go out there and buy more properties. And this is how you can turn one property into 3 or 4 properties. So, Joe or Jeff, any comments you guys want to make on this before we go back to PowerPoints?
The only thing I would say is you look at this and you're like, man, these numbers are insane. In year 10, this property is generating $41,000 and making 154% return. It almost seems too good to be true. But I want to tell you, I've done this for a number of years, tracking my properties, and I'll go back and look at a property that I bought 4 or 5 years ago and look at this analysis and then plug in where we're at today. And it, amazingly enough, actually works out better than what you see on this spreadsheet, because we've been seeing increased rents, we've been seeing increased appreciation, and inflation has been less than we've got factored in here. So it looks like just absolutely bananas to get this type of return, but buying the property and holding on to it, you're going to get generally an even better return than what this spreadsheet shows. Jeff, what's your experience been, Jeff?
Yeah, that's why I like this spreadsheet, because this is just a trend, like a forecast for somebody. And if you do things right and you follow certain strategies to maximize your cash flow and minimize vacancy and repairs by choosing really good tenants that don't destroy your property, you can achieve even these numbers are realistic and then some. These are just it's just a simple model. Not simple, but a model to help analyze and forecast and by managing it correctly, these numbers are realistic for anyone who's listening right now.
All right, so going back to some examples now. So I want to go back and we put a lot of numbers at you there and go back to this goal we've talked about a few times. It's a really common goal we hear from people, and that's making about $10,000 a month in cash flow. And so remember the basics of this. If you want $10,000 in cash flow, the simplest way to get there is to have $15,000 in gross rents before any expenses on properties with no mortgages. And a very common way to accumulate those properties and get this goal is buy those properties until you get $15,000 in gross rents, then stop buying the properties and use the debt snowball method to pay them off. So now, in the example we went through, we were assuming some longer term, higher rental rates by doing a room by room, about $3,200 a month. So I'm assuming, when you retire in 15 years, you probably don't want to be managing like 8 properties with, 30 tenants on different leases. That's not my dream idea of retirement. So I'm assuming, hey, let's just say you actually, in a few years, you're actually going to go towards long-term tenants, or, a single tenant in your property. So that'll be a lower rental rate that you have. So going back to the same property, that house will rent for $2,500, probably a little bit more, but I'm just rounding out for easy math. So if I want to get to a gross rent of $15,000 and this property I just bought can rent for $2,500, well, $15,000 divided by $2,500 is going to give you 6 properties. So that means I need 6 properties, 6 paid off of these properties to hit this $10,000 a month goal. So is it possible? Absolutely. But are you going to get house hack fatigue? Potentially. Joe, what was the number you shared last night? You said of all the clients you've done over the years, you've had one at 7 years and most do. What were those numbers you shared? Oh,
I've had one client do 7 house hacks. That is the absolute max. Most stop 3 to 4. And I guess I shouldn't say house hacks. They were actually doing nomad, like before house hacking was even a thing. So I've had one client buy a property, live in it for a year, move out, rent the prior property. They did it 7 times. That's the maximum. Although Jeff did say he's going to do 8 just to impress me. So I'm pretty excited to see that.
Yes.
But most of the time, 3 to 4 times, and then people just get tired of moving.
And so, and we're just sharing this because we want to give you a realistic picture. You don't need a house hack for the next 20 years to be able to retire. But if you can do it a few times and then let the market do its thing, you really set yourself up for some success. And just keep in mind on that spreadsheet we're just looking at, right around that year 5 mark is usually when you start getting some more options to do with that current property. So option 1 you have is that you can refinance properties to drop PMI and or lower your interest rate to increase cash flow. Now, as Joe said, on a 5% down, PMI will automatically drop off around year 9. Now, what's happened is that sometimes the market just appreciates so fast, it makes sense to refinance and drop PMI. Or right now, we've seen interest rates drop more. So sometimes people are refinancing now through the lower interest rate. So, Jeff, let's talk about your fourplex, if you don't mind, because I know this is a very recent transaction for you. Yeah. You bought your first, you bought your fourplex house hack. How many years ago was it?
August 2017. So about a little under 3 years.
Okay. So let's just say 3 years for an easy example. And so with FHA loans, they have PMI for the life of the loan. Just how they are. PMI never drops off. But then you just recently refinanced into conventional loan, right?
Yeah. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Thanks for letting us help you with it.
Why'd you do that, Jeff?
Well, I know my main goal was, realistically, I know with multifamily, and Joe could speak more on this, you need a lot more equity to cash out refinances. So I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking more just a term refinance just to get out of my FHA loan to lower my monthly payment, because I was paying like $400 a month of FHA PMI, or MIP, whatever they call it. And I knew like, okay, that's a ton to pay per month. The rates are probably the lowest they'll ever be right now. Why not try for it? And I knew the last 2.5 years, the market still appreciated. So I was like, I might as well take the risk of getting a appraiser out there to see what they think and hope for the best. And go ahead.
And so you said the risk of an appraiser. What's the risk of getting an appraiser out there?
Okay, so if it's an opinion of value. So you could have the nicest property in the world, but if they think and they look at the other comps and everything tells him or her that it's worth X amount and you're wanting Y amount, and then the X amount is not enough equity to get out of whatever loan you're in, then you're pretty much stuck. Either hire another appraiser, or just dealing with your current loan.
And I mean, how much did the appraisal cost you?
Because multifamily and $800, Joe, is that what it is?
Yep. Yeah, it's $800 for multifamily.
So I mean, worst case scenario, and I wanted to highlight the word risk because in my mind this is very low risk. I mean, your risk here is you'll be bummed out that you can't refinance your loan, but you still have the loan, you still have the property. But okay, you might be out some paperwork and some time, but you're at $800. Very, very low risk when it comes to rental properties. Now, Jeff, do you mind sharing how much was your monthly mortgage insurance on your original FHA loan?
Yeah, so about $400 a month for that mortgage insurance on that FHA loan.
So, which is a lot of money, but obviously made a lot of sense because you're able to buy a multifamily for very little down using FHA. Yeah. What was your interest rate?
3.875.
Okay. Yeah. And then you got this new conventional loan, which is where PMI can drop off, but it's also an investment loan, which, as Joe said, requires a 25% equity build in there. So what's your interest rate on the new loan you got?
3.625.
So think about this for a second, guys. Jeff has just, he's continued house hacking. His life has moved on. He's bought a couple other properties. He's let the market do its thing. And hey, luckily for him, interest rates have dropped. Prices have appreciated. So now just by doing some paperwork, by spending $800 on appraisal, he now has $400 more in cash flow every month by refinancing. And I don't know how much of the interest rate drop saved you, but that's going to be a few dollars a month, right? Joe, what's some quick math on that? What? Eighth of a point?
Side, probably about $100. Yeah, maybe $75.
Okay. So you're saving $475 a month now. And then Jeff, did you have to put any money into closing to refinance a property besides the $800 appraisal?
Actually, even better. I got a check at closing for $500. So it was kind of like actually, Joe, you could probably answer that. What was that check for? Was that just the timing of things or something?
Yep, exactly. Well, it was your first payment. It was the down payment on my Tiger. No, it's so what happens when we do a new loan, your loan is generally going to be in a round dollar amount, right? It's going to be $582,500 or whatever. And we don't know when we set up the initial loan exactly what your payoff is going to be. We don't know exactly the day you're going to close. We don't know exactly how much interest is going to be due. So we try and overestimate a little bit. And so your new loan is $582,500. Well, once we get all the final numbers on the day of closing, we've got a little bit left over. We pay everything off. We pay the taxes, the insurance, and that remaining cash just goes back to you because it's cash back to you from that new loan. We call it ancillary cash back, and it doesn't actually cost you anything additional as if you were taking $20,000 or $30,000 cash out. There's no change to your interest rate. It's basically just rounding because we never know exactly what that final dollar amount is going to be when we get started.
And so thank you for sharing that information, Jeff. But just to kind of recap this here. So Jeff bought this house, let's just say 3 years ago to make it easy. He let the market do its thing. Jeff is a patient, long-term investor here. And he said, hey, I'm at a point. I probably have just enough equity to maybe do a conventional loan to drop PMI. Interest rates are near an all-time low. Let's move forward with this. So he spent some time. He spent $800 on the appraisal, actually got $500 back. So he's out of pocket like $300. And now every single month, his payment is now saving him $475 a month. That's a huge win. So let that sink in. And this is just one of the options you can do as you start holding properties for the long run. Refinance it, and you may be able to save some cash. Again, Joe has talked about this, but you'll hear us mention this again. It may reset the 12-month occupancy requirement if you're doing this while you live there. Now, Jeff has not lived there for a couple of years, so this is why it went to an investment loan, and there's no 12-month occupancy requirement on there. It's a landlord investment loan. And so, Joe, generally speaking, for house hackers out there looking at refinancing to potentially lower their payments through PMI or interest rate, is there a general timeline? Is this something they can do 3 months later, 6 months later, 3 years later? What guidance do you have on that?
Yeah, on average, it's about 3 years. And if you think through that, it kind of makes sense. If you buy a property, you put 5% down. And in Denver right now, we're seeing properties appreciate 6 to 8% per year, right? So the property goes up 6% for the first year, 6% the second year, 6% the third year. Now you've got that 20 to 25% equity in the home to refinance and eliminate that monthly mortgage insurance. So I have some clients that refinance sooner, but maybe they don't eliminate mortgage insurance. Maybe they're just looking for a lower rate. I have some clients that, refinance later, 5 years, 6 years, and then they really save a lot of money because they've paid the principal down quite a bit. But generally, air quotes, you guys can't see me doing it, but generally it's about 3 years is about the time that you need to be in a property before it makes sense to refinance.
Great. And of course, this is something like use that guideline, but this is why you want to be talking to your lender and your whole real estate team on a regular basis, because your lender, they'll give you ideas that, hey, this might be a good time to drop this or do this. I mean, Joe has called me in the past saying, hey, you should consider refinancing. We can save you money. I'm like, great. So this is why you want to have a good lender, a good real estate team, because they help you identify these opportunities.
Yeah, that's one thing that, I have a couple of people on my team. That's their whole job is to go through our database and look, they're looking at Jeff's loan once every 6 months. All right, does it make sense for him to refinance? And they're going to go through it. Nope, he's in the best possible spot. Great. We're going to send him an email or we're going to call and check in. Hey, you know what? 123 Main Street, Jeff, that's in the best possible spot. Unless there's a reason you wanted to make a change, keep doing what you're doing. But then, it might be 18 months down the road, something happens, interest rates go down, the value of the property goes way up. We're going to call them, hey, you know what, Jeff, now's a good time that we might want to review it. You don't have to do anything. We might go through the review and you might say, you know what, I'm going to stick with what I'm doing. Cool. But at least we've reviewed it and kind of where you stand and if there's a way to improve it or leave it the same.
All right. So option one, or I guess option one is do absolutely nothing. Just let the property do its thing. So option two is to go out there and refinance your property to lower your payment. So the third option is to actually do a refinance, but this time it's to do a cash out refinance to take some money out and go buy more properties. So very similar process to we talked about with Jeff earlier, but now we're actually taking a cash out refinance. So Joe, from a high level, from your standpoint, what are the main differences between a terms only refinance like Jeff and a cash out refinance?
Yeah, cash out refinance is going to have a little bit of a higher interest rate, generally about 0.25% higher. That's number one. Number two, you're going to be limited on how much you can borrow. So if it's an investment property, you've moved out of the property, you can only borrow up to 75% of the value of the property to take cash out of it. If it's still your primary residence, you can borrow up to 80% of the value of the property taking cash out. But don't forget, if it's your primary residence, you've got to live there for another 12 months. So it doesn't work if you want to take cash out and then 3 months later you want to buy your next house hack. You can do that, but you would have to refinance it as an investment property, not as a primary.
So I just went through this process myself in November to do a cash out refinance with Joe. So I'm going to run you through the numbers real quick and show how doing cash out refinance on a property can have a major impact on your long-term wealth building aspect. Actually, before I do that, one thing I want to talk about, actually, I just realized my next bullet point here. This was a strategic move that one of our clients did. And And so they're a family in Littleton, and they're nomading around a few properties. They're not having roommates because they got, their husband and wife, they got kids, and they don't want to have tenants or roommates or anything like that. But they can go out there, they want to acquire a few rental properties just for their future retirement, 15, 20 years down the road. And so they met with me, sometime last year. We had our strategic meeting, and I said, hey, go talk to Joe, get this figured out. They talked with Joe. We all had some back and forth figuring out options because they had bought a house, I think back in like 2011, 2012, quite a few years ago. Before they were into real estate investing, before they knew what a nomad was, all this stuff, but they bought a house. So over those, number of years, what's happened? They are sitting on a good chunk of equity on their property. And so we ran through scenarios of saying, hey, you can do a cash out refinance to go out there and buy more rental properties. And then they sat down with Joe and they ran through two scenarios. They ran through a scenario where they did a primary cash out refinance, which would make them stay there another 12 months. Or they ran the scenario of doing an investment property refinance where they could refinance and move out, that same day. And so based on everything they did as far as the numbers, there was not a huge difference in the interest rate between those two options, nor a huge difference in the amount of cash they could take out. And since they were looking to do a few moves before their kids got too old and were into school systems, they said, let's just go ahead and get the investment property interest rate, even though it's, 3/4 of a point higher than the primary refinance. Let's pull that money so we have it so we can go out there and buy one property. Because we could save $100 a month by doing this. But in the grand scheme of things, we think buying one property 1 year sooner will make us a lot more money in the long run. And if you look at financial modeling, that is absolutely the right decision to make from a spreadsheet perspective. So what they did is they pulled out a good chunk of money. They bought property number 2, and now they took out way more money than they needed to buy that first property. It's not because they can go out there and go on a bunch of vacations, but because, we're going to pull out this money because interest rates are low, we're in a good position, and we're going to put that money in the bank. That'll be our reserves, and that's going to help fund our next couple of down payments on the next nomads, 2, 3, and 4 as well. So this was a strategic move they did here, and this is just one of the other ways you can go out there and look at cash out refinances. So Joe, on this transaction, what details am I leaving out?
Nothing. I think you hit the nail on the head. For these guys, it made sense to have just a slightly higher interest rate to do that investment property loan on this property, because then they were not stuck living there for another 12 months. They were able to get the cash that they needed. And I'd have to go back and look, but I want to say they didn't even spend all the cash. The dollar amount for that was pretty sizable. I want to say it was 60 or 70. And I think they put maybe $30,000 down on the new place. So they've already got $30,000 or approximately $30,000 in the bank to buy property number 3 after they've lived in property number 2 for the next year.
And you're exactly right, because this is something we looked at. Once they got the quotes from you, I sat back down with them and we looked at, because they said, hey, our savings rate is this per month. And it'd be hard for them to save that per month and buy the next property at that 12-month mark. So they pulled out the cash in the savings account. They're saving more, and that's going to be their reserves and help them buy the next couple properties. So brilliant strategic play. But it took us about a month to figure this out, to put it together. But that's why they sat down with me and Joe. We figured this all out. And now they've got their plan out for the next 2 or 3 years.
And one of the things that I loved about this transaction, they didn't rush into it. I don't know if these guys are watching or not, but I'm a huge fan of these clients. They didn't just sit down and say, okay, this is exactly what we want to do. They were super methodical and super thoughtful. And we went through the options and they said, okay, you know what? We want to go home. We want to think about it. And they had, I wasn't there. I wasn't part of the conversation, but I'm sure they had very in-depth conversations for, okay, how much longer do we want to live in this home? Are we comfortable moving out of the home right away? It's going to cost us a little bit more every month on this payment, but it's going to allow us to get to our goals sooner. So I was just super impressed with these folks that did this, because they took the time to think through it and really make a great decision for themselves.
I 100% agree. All right, now let me go through my example on cash out refinance. So as I've told you guys, my mother-in-law lives with us. That's the house hacking I'm doing by doing a family house hack. And so we could not find a house that met our requirements for us to live in and also for my mother-in-law to live in. So we bought a big house with a walkout basement. And then in 2018, we spent about $100,000 in building out the mother-in-law suite. So as a side note, I get people ask me all the time, hey, should I just buy a house with an unfinished basement and just finish out the basement to mother-in-law suite? No, the numbers don't make sense. You probably won't spend $100,000, but you're going to be spending $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. You'll be spending more likely more than the down payment you would be on the next property. So from a number standpoint, it does not make sense. Now, we did obviously a very nicer, higher end finish because this was, a place where my mother was going to live for a long time. And so she wanted to be very nice to her specs. And the way it worked was she sold her house where she lived, and then she took part of those proceeds because she lived in the house for like 30 years, took part of those proceeds, and she's the one that spent the upgrades in the mother-in-law suite. So it was a great win-win. She didn't have to go out there and buy a $400,000 house in Denver because she did not want to have a mortgage payment. And we didn't want to spend $100,000 on cash. So it was a great win-win. She spent that money. So she actually spent a lot less money than she would if she bought a house herself. And then we were able to minimize cash out of our pocket, and we're just paying the monthly mortgage payments. So another strategic play there we're doing because it met her needs, but also meets my needs where I want my cash on hand to go out there and buy rental properties. So my loan at that time, when we bought the property and then we did the remodel, it was 4%, and my principal and interest payment was $2,118. And so we finished the remodel in November, December 2018. And then November 2019, I did a cash out refi with Joe. And so based on everything, I was able to pull $106,500. Now, part of that was to market appreciation, but a big part of that was just the improvements we made to the property. So this was more than I expected, but I was happy to have that number. I was expecting less, but this made complete sense. And so my interest rate actually dropped by 0.25%. So it went down to 3.75%. And my new payment went up to $2,599. So my payment increased by $480 a month. So I pulled out $106,000, but my payment increased by $480 a month. What do you guys like? Do you guys think that's a good move, a bad move? What do you guys think about that? Like, I pulled out a big chunk of money, but now I'm paying more money on that.
Ooh, I've got one, but I want to hear what Jeff thinks first.
If I could pull out $106,000 and use that to invest in future properties and only pay an extra $480, I would take that all day long. Simple. Without even thinking about it.
Great. Joe, what's your thought? I we just made that so matter of fact, but I agree. That was a no-brainer to me.
Yep. I think it's spot on. My question, what are you planning to do with $106,000? And I ask this question of 100% of my clients, and there's no wrong answer. If you tell me, hey, you know what? I'm taking that money and I'm going to Vegas and I'm having a wild weekend. Okay, good luck. More power to you. But you're probably going to regret it. But you can do that. But I love what Jeff said. You're taking that money, you're reinvesting it into something else. That something else is going to generate more than $480 in cash flow all day long. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't do it, because you're taking equity, the money that you already have that's tied up in your home, converting it into another property that's going to generate you more cash flow. I agree with Jeff all day long.
And so that was my plan. And then this is one of the fun things about real estate is that things change. And then as Jeff just talked about, he refinanced his fourplex. I refinanced my primary house again around the same time because interest rates just dropped even more. So this time I did a terms only refinance, which is what Jeff did. I pulled out no cash, but I was able to get a much better interest rate. So now my interest rate dropped to 2.875%. So almost a whole point lower. So now my new payment's about $23.85 a month, which is only $266 more than my original payment. So now I have $106,000 in my checking account or my savings account, and I'm only paying $266 to borrow that money. So I was happy when I was thrilled at 480 and I was over the moon at 266. So let's walk through what I'm doing with this money. And this is actually one of the properties that I did purchase, and I've yet to purchase the other property, but that will be happening soon. So this is a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom condo in Aurora. I won't go through all the details on the property, but I'll go through them real quick and then talk about the returns I'm getting on the money. So it's a $195,000 purchase price. I put 25% down. So all in with repairs, acquisition cost, down payment, I'm all in for $60,000. I got a 30-year investment loan through Joe at 3.875%. the property rents for $1,850 a month. So I have all the normal expenses in there and underwriting things. And that property is going to cash flow just over $4,000 a year. So let's think about this for a second. So 4,000 divided by 12, what's that, like $330 a month?
Yep, 330.
Okay. So right there, this is only, $60,000 out of the $106,000 I borrowed. I'm making $330 a month in cash flow. Well, that's greater than my $266, but less than the original $480 a month I was making, which I was fine with either way. Because keep in mind, cash flow is only one aspect of it. Because just like what we talked about in that previous spreadsheet with the Aurora House Hack, in addition to cash flow, I'm getting tax benefits, but also I'm getting an equity build on here. So we all know the power of like compounding interest, that the sooner you put money into a retirement account, the better you're off in the long run. Same thing with real estate. The sooner you buy real estate and you have the properties appreciate, your debts pay down, and you build that equity, the more wealth you're building in the long run. So I'm looking at this not just as cash flow, but hey, now I have another asset that will be generating me equity, which then in 5 or 10 years, I can maybe just pay off, or maybe I'll pull money out again and buy another property. So let's just pretend, I bought 2 of these, and I'll buy another property pretty similar to this. So all in, I'll be in for about $115,000, $120,000. Well, I pulled out $106,000. So I can make up that $14,000 difference. That's not a huge amount of money. It's not like $100,000, $14,000. I can save that in a reasonable amount of time. So now if I just buy another property like this, I'll be making $8,000 a year cash flow. That's way more than what my payment is. And now I have 2 assets that are building equity and appreciation on, or that's building equity through appreciation and debt pay down. Plus I'll be getting a few $1,000s a year in tax benefits from it as well. So this is just another example you can do as you own the property. And Joe, for someone to do a cash out refi like this, again, my situation was very unique that we did a huge remodel on the property and actually added that same amount of value to the house, which is pretty uncommon. What's a typical timeline where someone can do an effective cash out refinance here?
Yeah, so this is such a good question, and it comes back to what you've been doing with the property. This was unique for you because you added value, right? You bought the property for, whatever dollar amount it was, and you added $100,000 to it. Well, the value of the property went up $150,000, which that's exactly what happens when you do a fix and flip, or anytime you renovate a property. Hopefully, the value goes up greater than what you put into it. If you just buy the property, you don't do any renovations to it, you're just going to have to follow the market. If the market's going up 6% a year, you might have to wait several years until you've got sufficient equity. But one of the things you could do, let's take an example here. Click on long-term analysis, if you would, Chris.
Yep.
Scroll in just a little, or zoom in a little bit. Let's go down to your value and a little bit more there. Okay, stop right there. Your property value and your mortgage balance. Go over maybe to year number 5.
Okay.
So we've got property value of $248,875. You could borrow up to 75%, which would be a new loan of $186,000. You've got to pay off, of course, the current loan of $132,000. So you'd be able to take out about $54,000 from the property in about 5 years. And that's assuming you don't add one nickel to it. You don't do anything other than put a tenant in there and just keep the property clean. In 5 years, you could take out another $54,000 and use that money to buy another property.
Do that math again, Joe, because you did that
you
fast.
Pull up the calculator? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. No, you're good. I just want to explain this because this is we can do this quickly, but I know a lot of people, this is new stuff to them. So we're at year 5 on the long-term analysis. Property value is at 248, 875. What do I do now?
Now multiply that times 0.75 because you can borrow up to 75% of the value on an investment property.
Okay.
So this is your new loan, 186,656 minus, because you've got to pay off the existing loan balance of 132. So minus 132,011. So there's your amount of cash you could take out, roughly $54,600. Maybe you're going to have some closing costs in there for a couple thousand. So maybe you would walk away with $51,000, $52,000. So now the question is, what would you do with that 50 some odd $1,000? Are you going to go to Vegas? Are you going to party? Or are you going to buy another property? My recommendation, buy another property.
You're not going to get into a tiger breeding with Jeff and sell baby tigers?
I mean, let's be honest. You might make a lot of money with that. You might lose it all, but you might make a lot.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a great way to look at it, because this is what I often do with my clients. So make sure you understand that math, the math Joe just walked us through here. It's very simple, but this is a powerful concept and a quick way to do some quick estimations as to when you can pull out cash. Now, when I look at this stuff, I usually see potential somewhere between like 5 and 7 years if you look at modeling. Now, the last few years the Denver market has been crazy. It's been like 3 to 5 years. But using some more, historical averages of 3 to 5% appreciation, we're often seeing that in like that 5 to 7 year mark, where it might make a lot of sense to do a cash out refi.
Yeah, what I think is interesting about this is, what was your down payment for this, Chris? 60,000 or something like that?
My actual down payment was less than that. My down payment was $48,750. Then with all the acquisition costs, repairs, about $60,000.
Yeah, and if you look back at your number, it was approximately, if you did a cash out refi, 54,600 minus closing costs, 52,000. Pretty much getting all the down payment money 5 years later, not counting any other cash flow or tax benefits or anything else. You'll be able to access that money. It's not locked into property, and then you can multiply that money for another property and then do it again. And then that's how you really play the long-term real estate wealth building game.
That is such a great point, Jeff.
Yeah.
The other thing actually made me think about this too, because Joe, if I do a cash out refi with you, what do I owe in taxes on there?
$0.00. That is not a taxable event because it's not income. It's property that you already own.
And that's a big difference between a fix and flip, or you sell a property. That stuff you owe taxes on. As Joe said, you do a cash out refi, you don't owe any taxes on that, which is amazing, which is a point a lot of people take for granted and don't appreciate. All right. So I think we got that point across. Let me go back to my notes and slides here. Oh, yeah. So going back to that $10,000 a month goal we have, which is also $120,000 a year, I put together a very simple table to track this. So if I did my cash out refi and I went there and bought 2 properties like the one I just showed you, once those properties are paid off, they'll be generating me $24,600 a year in net operating income. So that's rents minus all my expenses, except for mortgage payments, but then I have no mortgage debt on here. So if I just bought those properties and let them pay off, or I took the cash from, put the property and paid them off themselves, that gets me 21% towards my goal of $120,000 a year. So by doing a cash out refi, now of course mine was unique because I actually put money in the property. But if someone just goes out there and buys a house hack, then 7 years is a cash out refi, they can leverage up like that, and now that can have a significant jump. I mean, I went from 0% in this example to 21% by using no cash on my pocket. That took me about 1/5 my way to the goal. That is powerful stuff. And this is why you understand these tactics or these strategies, and also be patient and be long-term, have a long-term mindset. So you'll see, actually, we'll jump to the next example here. Oh, plus I put a note on here that that number I share with you does not include any additional properties I've purchased from my personal savings rate and my monthly house hacking savings rate by having my mother all live with me. That was just the cash out refi I did. And that gets me 1/5 of the way towards this $10,000 a month goal. All right, so here's another example. And this is a transaction I did. And this is just a great one. Like, this is one of the stories where, like, I had no idea what I was doing 10 years ago, and it turned out to be a great play. This is talking about a 1031 exchange. If you don't know what a 1031 exchange is, that is an IRS code that allows you to sell an investment property and then defer your capital gains taxes and basically not pay them now and buy another property. Now, there's a lot of rules with this here, but basically you can sell one property. And if you buy another investment property within a certain time frame, you pay no capital gains taxes at that moment. You just kind of kick the can down the road. So it's kind of like putting money in a 401k account. You're just kind of pushing the money down the road. Except with this, you can actually avoid capital gains. You don't have to actually ever pay it once you take the money out. It's an absolutely powerful wealth building tactic. And if you want all the details on here, Google it or check out one of our podcasts on it, because I'm just giving you the name of what we're doing. And one thing to keep in mind is that doing a 1031 exchange, which is where you sell the property and then reinvest it, it's just another way to extract the equity. And so depending on your property, your goals, the market situation, sometimes it makes the most sense to do a cash out refinance. And sometimes it makes the most sense to sell and do a 1031 exchange. There's no clear-cut answer on here, but it's just one thing to keep in mind. They're both ways to extract equity from your real estate piggy bank and go out there and buy more rental properties. So here's an example I did, and I'm going to do a highlight on here. Doing all the details, look at the return on equity podcast I did, because I went to a lot of details on this one. So back in 2011, before I was an agent, before I had any idea what I was doing with real estate, I bought it was a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom condo in Reno, Nevada for $67,000. So I bought it, right when prices were at the lowest point. I got lucky there. After a few years, right around 2013, 2014, I turned into a rental property because I moved to another property. In 2019, actually in May of 2019, I sold it for $229,000. So what happened over those 8 years? Well, I had a huge equity build. I went from $67,000 to $229,000. Now, when I bought the property, those units were running about $1,100 a month. And when I sold the property, market was like $1,300 a month. So while my value almost tripled, my rents got nowhere near that. They didn't even double. They went up by $200 a month. So that's rents not keep pace with equity. And so this is some of the times where it makes sense to sell the property and do a 1031 exchange. Because if I did a cash out refinance, this would be a native cash flowing property. So I could pull out money, but now my property would be native cash flowing, and that's usually not a great asset. So that's a very high level rule of thumb of a cash out refi versus a 1031 exchange. So after I sold it and paid off the little loan balance I had, I paid the agents, the closing costs, all that stuff, I walked away with about $172,000. And so I put this into a 1031 exchange because I didn't want to pay capital gains in there because I owed like $40,000, which is a lot of money. And then later that year, I bought a fourplex in Westminster for $850,000. And then in 2020, I'm in the process now of refinancing to a lower interest rate. And I mostly want to talk about the trade up, and I'll talk about the interest rate here in a second. But I made a note on here that even if I'm refinancing this property, or like Jeff refinanced his fourplex, great. That's getting more cash flow today, but that will not affect your long-term retirement goal when the property is paid off. It just gives you more cash flow today. So refinancing is a great benefit to get more cash flow now, but once the property is paid off, it has no impact on your retirement goals. So let me pull up the spreadsheet here. And I'm going to go through this real quick and just talk about some of the numbers on here. So I bought for $850,000. My total all-in investment was about $228,000. So I had to bring an extra like $40,000 cash to close to do this transaction. My interest rate's at 5.25%, but altogether between rents and some utility bill back, rents are about $6,600 a month. So my current place in Reno is renting for $1,300 a month. So Joe, you're like a math genius. Is $6,600 greater than $1,300?
Yes, it is. I didn't even have to get my calculator out for that.
That's why you're a fantastic lender. So I put in normal assumptions here: 5% vacancy, 3% appreciation, 10% for property management, 8% for repairs and reserves. And both of those numbers, my real number is actually lower than that, but I'm putting in higher numbers for a long-term average to look at this from a long-term perspective. My taxes are about $3,600 a year. Insurance is $1,550. All my utilities are like, I don't know, $5,000, $6,000 a year for water, sewer, trash, electric, $1,000 for landscaping and some snow removal. So you can see here, it's a good property. So long term, it's like a 5.8% cap rate. So for a multifamily, and this is actually in great shape, that's a really good deal. Now you can see here, after I pay all my expenses and I pay my mortgage payment, my cash flow is about $7,300 a year. Now, in reality, it's actually higher than that, but I'm doing a long-term average on here. So about $7,300 a year. And my net operating income, that's my cash, that's my rent, minus my expenses, but before mortgage payments, is about $49,500. So once the property is paid off, that's the amount of money I'll be making free and clear that I can live off of. So I want to take that number in mind, $49,500. And let me go back and compare that to what that property in Reno would do for me. And Joe, actually, I got it here. So my condo return, and this was my current numbers if I kept it as a rental property, my cash flow after all my expenses would be about $2,900 a year. Using that 33% rule, that 33% of my rents will go towards my operating expenses, I'd be making about $10,500 a year once the property is paid off. And that property would have been paid off in about 7 years because I actually had on a 15-year mortgage. So in 7 or 8 years, I'd be making just say about $1,000 a month for easy math. So if you look at that towards my $10,000 a month goal, that gets me 8.7% of my way towards my goal. Now my annual fourplex return, my current cash flow at the 5.25% interest rate using very conservative numbers is about $7,300 a year. Joe, back to your amazing math skills. Is $7,300 a year greater than $3,000 a year?
7,300 is greater than 3,000. Yes, sir.
All right. I might have one more question for you on here. So as I'm getting this refinance done, my interest rate should hopefully be right around Jeff. So say about a 3.75%. Well, that's going to give me a $14,000 a year cash flow. And so again, all I'm doing is I'm just refinancing the property in terms only to drop the interest rate because interest rates have dropped. So this is just another way we can layer these tactics on top of each other and actually increase your cash flow a day while building your long-term wealth. So using that 33% rule, saying that once the property is paid off and I have no mortgage payments and I pay my expenses, I'll be making $49,500 a year. And again, whether I refinance or I don't, that number stays the same because that's assuming the property is paid off. Now, once I have that $49,500 a year in annual cash flow, that gets me 41% towards my annual goal of $120,000 a year in income. So I went from 8.7% to 41% towards my goal. Was that a good move?
I say yes. Jeff, what do you think?
Absolutely. All day long.
And I mean, this is just one of those things where like people just often don't think about it. And I can't remember if I said this on this module because I say this to almost every single client I talk to now. I'm like, whatever property you buy the very first time, there's a really good chance in like 10 years or 15 years, you no longer own the property. Because I bought this property. I mean, I look back, as far as I could tell, I was the cheapest condo ever purchased in that complex. I mean, I got so lucky when I bought that place. And I literally drove up there on a Saturday, bought the place, and drove home. I spent like one of the things I spent 3 hours looking, bought it, went home. I bought it for 0% down. I got a private lender to give me 0% down on a 15-year note at 5%. So my instant return on there was like, an infinite return of money because I put zero money down. Closing costs were wrapped into there. I mean, I put $0 at the closing table. My first out-of-pocket money was my first month's rent payment or my first mortgage payment, a month later. So I was like, I am never going to sell this property because it's such a screaming deal. And this was before I knew anything about real estate. Then I got into real estate, learned the power of cash out refis and 1031 exchanges, and realized, oh yeah, I'm going to sell this SOB. Because you can see here, my retirement income went up by almost 5 times. Went up from about $10,500 to almost $50,000 a year. So is doing a 1031 the right move for you? It may be, it may not. Depends on a lot of things. Depends on how your property does. Maybe it makes sense as a great rental property and maybe do a cash out refi. As I said, this one didn't. Maybe once it has enough equity in there, you're so close to your retirement goals, you're like, hey, I don't need to buy any more properties. I just need to finish paying off the mortgage. So it's one of those things that just depends on a lot of factors on there. You, the market, the property, your goals. But this is stuff you want to keep in mind on here. So going back to my tracker here, talking about that first example with those 2 condos I purchased, I'll be having about just under $25,000 a year in cash out refi for my primary residence. I'll have just under $50,000 a year on my fourplex. Add those 2 together, I'll be right around $74,000 a year in income. That gets me 62% of the way towards my goal. Now, the vast majority of that money actually came from equity in my properties. Now, my refi, my primary refi, I'll have to bring extra like $15,000 to buy the property. For my fourplex, I brought $40,000. So I brought an extra $55,000 in cash to buy these rental properties. But if I just use that $55,000 to buy a property, I could buy 1 condo. Rather, I use that with my equity, and I bought 2 condos and a fourplex. So that's
a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
But you know how I got that? I was patient. And Joe, you've been in real estate longer than I have. How many investors are patient?
How many? Boy, that's a good question. I can tell you, I don't know. I don't know how many are patient, but I can tell you this. All my wealthy investors are patient.
I think that's the key phrase right there. And I mean, that goes true for people that build a business. That goes true for people that build a stock market. This is not a fundamental to just real estate. It's a fundamental to building wealth. And just to highlight this fact, we've talked about this a few times. You don't need a grand slam first property, because if you hold on to it for a while, your cash flow will increase and your equity will increase. Both of those gives you options on there. Another key point to remember is that accumulation of multiple properties is vital. As we talked about in the very first module of the slide, I'd rather have 5 okay rental properties versus 1 grand slam property. Because fast forward 10 years, I'll have more cash flow and I'll have more equity than Jeff with his grand slam first property. So what if I had bought 3 of those condos back then? You know, bought one in 2011, bought one in 2012, bought one in 2013. I might be close to 3 fourplexes right now. And that's the power of accumulating multiple properties. All right, guys. So for this module, anything to add before we wrap up?
Nothing for me.
No, that was fantastic.
Cool. And so, guys, like I said, to me, this is like the really fun part to investing. It's that long-term wealth building aspect. And just as a reminder, some additional resources you can use. Later this year, we will be publishing a Create Your Real Estate Investing Strategy course. Make sure you plug into that. Meet with me, meet with Joe, meet with Jeff on a regular basis. We're here to discuss these options with you, to look at it. I mean, when I make real estate moves, I often talk to Joe. I'm like, hey, Joe, I'm thinking about this. Let me bounce this off you. So like, I do that with Joe. My clients do that with us. So make sure you're talking to your real estate team about that, because getting other people to look at that will help you identify opportunities and also make sure you're not doing something silly. Last but not least, make sure you do read and eventually write a chapter in our annual 2020 Guide to Denver Real Estate Investing Strategies. Every year, a new book will be published. And currently, anyone's invited to go out there, write a chapter, and put it in the book. Joe and Jeff were in the 2019 edition. They're also in the 2020 edition. And I'm pretty sure you guys will be in the 2021 edition, right?
Definitely.
I hope I get invited to come back.
Oh, of course. Now, Jeff, if you want to be in the next edition, man, I need a baby tiger. So
yeah, I'll provide that for you just so I can be in the 2021.
Just planting the seed. All right, guys. So this kind of wraps up everything, not just for this module, but the whole Ultimate House Hacking course. So we really appreciate you getting this information out there. I know we went into a lot of details out here, but that's our whole goal with this. We talk about this stuff almost on a daily basis, and we have so much knowledge. We want to give you a ton of information out there, start learning about this, and build a great resource to go out there and study it. If you have any questions on the content, or we can help you out with buying properties, financing properties, running your house hack, reach out to me, reach out to Joe, reach out to Jeff. So everyone, thank you for going through this course with us. And Joe and Jeff, I really appreciate you guys doing this with me. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for putting this together. And Jeff, thanks so much for joining us, man. It's been great to have you here. Great to have your experience. It's good to have a new person, so I don't have to listen to all of Chris's jokes, all the same jokes all the time. I'm glad to have somebody new with new jokes.
Well, now we got a Baby Tiger joke, We will
totally run that into the ground. Like 7 years from now, we'll talking about that. People are like, what Baby Tiger?
Oh my God. Well, thank you guys so much. It was a huge honor to be invited and help out with this. And I also learned from your perspectives and on all the other podcasts I've heard from you as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Everyone out there, have a great one.